Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here for the 2025 Waste Less and Celebrate More webinar hosted by PERG and Environment America. The holidays are a time where a ton of waste is generated in a lot of ways. Research has shown that Americans generate 25% more waste during the period between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day than the rest of the year. And there are a ton of ways that we could prevent that waste. A lot of it is really preventable, or at least lessen the environmental impact of the holiday season. So we're going to have five panelists present about different types of waste generated during the season, give tips on what we can do to reduce those waste streams, and give opportunities to engage directly with campaigns that focus on them. So feel free to ask questions or share your own tips and tricks for zero waste holidays in the chat or using the Q&A feature. We would love to collaborate with you and hear what you guys do to limit your own waste during the holidays. So I'll introduce panelists as they go, but my name is Grace Vickers and I'm the Plastic Pellet Free Waters Associate with US PERG. So I work primarily on plastics and microplastics things and zero waste issues really broadly. So I'm going to talk about plastic waste first. So plastic as a whole is just a really big issue for our environment right now, as probably many of you know. Plastic of all sizes is accumulating in our environment really rapidly. We're seeing microplastics like glitter and microfibers from clothing increasing in our environment at really high rates. And this is obviously detrimental to both our own health and our wildlife. Plastic is being found in our bodies at really high rates, and it's having devastating impacts on marine and terrestrial life around the world. This is, of course, fueled by our incredibly high consumption and production of plastics around the world and our societal demand for plastic products. So at a really big picture, our consumption of plastic is the problem. Americans use an insane amount of plastic. Plastic production and demand and consumption have grown really dramatically since the 1950s, from about 2 million to nearly 460 million tons of plastic produced in the United States every year. And much of that plastic is single-use plastic, so we use it for only a couple of minutes or a couple of hours, but it will exist in our environment or in our world in some form for hundreds of years. To make that really big number seem a little bit more understandable, we generate enough plastic to fill the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, which is the largest professional sports stadium in America, about every 16 hours with plastic waste. And so if you break that down by person, on average, we produce about 267 pounds of plastic waste alone per person per year in the US, which is just an astounding number to think about. And that really high volume of plastic is really due to our reliance on plastic in our consumer goods and our growing demand for cheap, disposable, and widely available products. So we use the term to throw something away really commonly in our society, but really plastic doesn't go away once it's generated. The plastic we consume on a daily basis ends up in our landfills or incinerators. Only about 9% ends up being recycled, and the rest ends up in our environment, or the rest could end up in our environment. And because of all of that, it's really important that we take steps where we can to reduce our plastic consumption, especially during the holidays when we're using so much of it. So here are a couple of tips, because this is kind of a scary problem, but there are luckily a lot of ways we can reduce plastic waste during the holidays. So these are just some easy things to think about while you're purchasing gifts this holiday season. So first is to just think about what a gift is made out of, as a material that's designed to last. Is it single use? Aiming for sustainable materials that are both durable and long lasting. So trying to eliminate plastic goods and plastic packaging where that's an option. Buying fewer gifts is also a good option. Choosing quality over quantity can be better for the environment and for our pocketbooks. Buying fewer gifts can also give special meaning to the intentional ones we choose for our loved ones. Finding gifts with minimal packaging. Theo, one of the other panelists, will talk about ways to minimize wrapping waste in a few minutes, but initial from the source packaging should also be a consideration. Shopping locally and shopping from small businesses can often help reduce plastic packaging. And we also reduce packaging at the source by asking companies to reduce the packaging they use. And I'll share some petitions that Environment America and PIRG are gathering on that in a few minutes. Shopping strategically online is also something to be aware of during this time of year. If shopping online is unavoidable or the most accessible option to you, placing one order instead of many small orders is often the better environmental option. And then gifts that last, prioritizing gifts that will be cherished for a long time, either physically or as memories, is a really good tip for reducing plastic waste or just waste in general. Choosing durable, reusable items over single-use or disposable ones eliminates the need for, or by eliminating the need for physical gifts by choosing experiential ones, which we can talk about in a second. And then buying gifts that will help others reduce waste is also something to consider. If people in your life are passionate about or interested in reducing waste, you can show them like zero waste alternatives or things you've already implemented in your life. So consider giving them items or tools that can help with this. So a gift card for like a refillery or something near you, reusable or washable paper towels or products, and zero waste products or cosmetics that you enjoy trying are all good options. And then other ideas to reduce waste when gift giving are alternatives to traditional gift giving itself. So Secret Santa is a cool option. It's a really popular option for reducing the overall amount of gift we're purchasing or receiving. So if you struggle to come up with ideas for yourself, or you find yourself with a ton of presents that you don't use or enjoy, this can be a good strategy because normally you're buying only one present, maybe receiving only one as well. Pre-loved gifts are also a good option. It's a fun, sustainable choice as well. Thrifting, buying secondhand or vintage options can be a fun shopping experience for the purchaser and can result in kind of a unique gift that isn't available at traditional retailers. One good option for this is actually happening this Saturday with National Clothing Swap Day. So I'll send the link for that in a second as well. So if you can see if there are any events happening near you, holding a clothing swap is a good way to find pre-loved items that people might love. And then experiential gifts. I touched on this on my last slide, but gifts don't have to be tangible, physical things for people to enjoy them. Consider taking your family members to a meal or home cooking a meal for them, live music or sporting events, or on adventures to natural areas near you to celebrate the holidays and your time with them. And then homemade gifts are also a really fun option. They can also be really affordable if that's a consideration. I'm actually doing this in my own life this year by using small pieces of like sentimental fabric to craft clothing items and household items for my family members. But it can look like a lot of things. And then shared gifts are also a good option, especially if you're purchasing gifts for multiple people in the same household. So finding items they can all use, enjoy, or appreciate. It can be something like a house plant or a decoration, but it can also be something consumable like food. Making your household of family members cookies or a pie is a really fun way to celebrate the holidays. So those are all of the like plastic tips I have for reducing your plastic waste this season. PIRG also has a guide, a gift-giving guide to reducing holiday waste, and I'll drop in the chat before I pass things off to Megan Smith, who is the newest Economy Associate Organizing Director with US PIRG, and she's going to tell you about electronic waste.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Megan. Again, I'm the New Economy Associate Organizing Director with US PIRG. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can reduce electronic waste by buying refurbished technology instead of new. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, actually the one after that. Great. So I'll start off, oh, sorry, back one actually. So we have a really massive electronic waste problem right now. On average, Americans throw away 152 million smartphones every single year, which actually works out to 416,000 phones thrown out every single day. And this amount of electronic waste takes an enormous amount of resources and environmental destruction to feed this habit. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this habit, we buy 161 million smartphones a year, and that cell phone purchasing habit takes 23.1 million tons of raw material to satisfy. That's the equivalent of consuming an Empire State Building's worth of material every 6 days. And if we just used our electronics for longer, it would make a really big impact. If we kept our cell phones in use just 1 year longer, it would cut the planet warming equivalent of taking 600,000 cars off the road. So we know that that would really make a difference. Next slide. And one would really hope that with all this resource usage and waste, that we could recycle our way out of this electronic waste problem. But unfortunately, recycling isn't really a super viable solution. The majority of environmental damage from an electronic comes from manufacturing, and recycling won't do anything to stop that. Furthermore, it's impossible to create a device out of entirely recycled materials. In fact, zero phones have been made just from recycled materials because the rare earth materials you need in production are just used in too small quantities in those phones. So, if we really want to stop this cycle of overproduction and waste, we can't just recycle the old. But there's no need for us to, buy the latest smartphone every year when there's a much more environmentally friendly and cost-effective option, and that's buying refurbished technology. So, in order to help people buy refurbished, we've released our annual Fixed for the Holidays guide. Refurbished technology is a little bit different from just buying secondhand. It's usually been fixed and touched up in some way. And it's just way better for the planet than buying new. Because the environmental impact of electronics comes mostly from manufacturing, buying refurbished reduces the environmental impact of gifting a smartphone by 77 to 91%. It also prevents the extraction of 180 pounds of resources and the emission of 50 pounds of climate change pollutants. And you can also just get great savings on refurbished technology that's basically as good as new. So it's just the best thing for your wallet and for the planet. Next slide. So I'll post our full guide in the chat later, and we really recommend reading that. But I'll also go through some quick tips that you can use when shopping for refurbished technology this year. So the first thing is you want to check the warranty and returns policy for any site you're shopping from. You want at least a 90-day warranty. Many refurbishers will warranty electronics longer than the actual manufacturer, sometimes 1 to 2 years or more. But you should always read that information before you buy. Back Market is one site. They have a mandatory 1 year warranty. Others have 90 days. And then you also want to make sure you get at least a 30-day return policy and check for defects on the product once you get it, just in case it needs to be returned. Next slide. So you want to make sure you're getting a good price on your refurbished technology. Generally speaking, the cost for a reliable and certified pre-owned piece of equipment is around 15 to 20% less than buying new, plus 10% per year from the original sale. But if you shop around, you can also find deals that are a lot better than that. For example, there's people on Back Market that are selling an iPhone 15 Pro for $555, and that same phone from Apple could be as much as $1,000. So that's almost a 50% discount right there. Next slide, please. Next tip is that you want to check for accessories. So some items when they come new come with earphones, connecting cables, charging stations, and they might not always come with those important accessories when you buy used. So you should check to see what you're getting and see if you need to purchase other accessories in addition to the product. Next slide. So the best items to buy are those that are actually repairable. You want to avoid unrepairable devices like Apple's AirPods, which have sealed-in batteries and therefore a limited lifespan. You can look into the repairability track record of the manufacturer in a couple of different ways and using a few key tools. We have a report called Failing the Fix, and that brings over repair scores from France to the US, so you can see how devices fare in terms of repairability. Those kinds of scores are like energy labels, but they're for repairability. So they give you information about that before you purchase. The website Consumer Reports also tracks durability data for its members, and the website iFixit does takedowns of devices and scores them based on repairability. So on the screen, you can see a couple different examples of what these repair scores can look like. You want to make sure you're getting a repairable product. Next slide. So software support, you should also pay attention to whether or not an older refurbished device is still receiving software support. Microsoft recently ended support for its Windows 10 operating system, and there's millions of computers that can't run this operating system anymore and also can't upgrade to Windows 11. So that means they don't receive critical security support updates anymore. So if you're looking to buy an older laptop, you should make sure to get a device that's still receiving software support with any Windows brand. So think Dell, Acer, HP, there's a bunch more. You should be cautious of anything that's older than 7 years and just double check it. Next slide. So these are some places where you can shop refurbished. We recommend third-party refurbished markets. So these are sites like Back Market, Gazelle, or VIP Outlet. These are often refurbished professionally with certified sellers, and they grade the quality of the device so you'll know what to expect. And as soon as you open the box on a device, it's considered used. So a lot of these used refurbished products you're seeing are basically the same as brand new, but you can get just a way better deal on them. Next slide. So we want to be paying attention to the repairability of our electronics year-round, not just for the holidays. So we've launched our Design to Last campaign. We're trying to bring repair scores over to the US. So as I noted in one of the previous slides, France has these things called repairability scores, and they're kind of like energy labels, but for repairability. Manufacturers evaluate the repairability of their products in terms of 5 criteria, and then that score is displayed at the point of sale. So before you buy an object, you can actually know if it's going to be repairable and how long it's going to last. So you don't have to worry about an unfixable device breaking on you when you least expect it. We think that these should be displayed here. So we're calling on manufacturers to display these repairability scores from France for customers in the US so we can see them as well. And next slide. Finally, we're also targeting manufacturers for making products that are intentionally difficult or impossible to fix. One such product is Apple's AirPods. AirPods have sealed-in batteries, so that means that even if you wanted to open up the device and switch out the battery, you would break it just from opening it. By default, this means that this product has a limited lifespan because all batteries eventually lose their functionality. We shouldn't have products that break just from trying to fix them and keeping them in use. So if you'd like to do more or make our devices more repairable, you can sign our petition to Apple to stop making AirPods that are designed to die. And I will drop that in the chat right now, as well as our full guide on how you can buy refurbished technology.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Next, we have Emerson Damiano, who is the Waste Is Out of Fashion campaign associate with CalPERG in California, talking a little bit about fashion and clothing waste.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, it's true. Clothing waste accumulates heavily during the holidays, and I want to talk to you all about how we can avoid fashion waste. To begin, I want to explain the overarching problems in the fashion industry and the fact that we produce more clothing than we can actually wear. Next slide, please. We are producing over 100 billion items of clothing each year, and that is double the amount we produced in the year 2000. A lot of this overproduction is fueled by fast fashion, which is a business model that involves mass producing clothing at a low cost to quickly meet fast-changing trends. The clothing is often low quality and falls apart or is meant to be discarded after just a few wears. Next slide, please. Because of the influence of fast fashion and the cultural pressures telling us to buy more and more, the average US consumer buys 60% more clothes than at the turn of the century, keeps them for roughly half as long, and throws away about 80 pounds of clothes each year. In fact, textile waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the United States, but this is also a global problem. Next slide, please. Around the world, the equivalent of one dump truck full of clothing is dumped in a landfill or burned every second. This is a huge waste of resources, and it shows that we have a massive waste problem that is only continuing to grow. Next slide. Overall, the fashion industry has a very large impact on our environment. First, the fashion industry accounts for 8 to 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the combined emissions of international flights and ocean shipping. Making clothing is very resource intensive, and it has a very long and globalized supply chain that all contributes to the industry's climate warming emissions. The fashion industry also accounts for around 20% of global water pollution. This water pollution comes from the toxic chemicals and dyes that are used during the dyeing and treatment process and therefore run into our waterways. And then the fashion industry is also responsible for 35% of microplastics found in our oceans. This is because over 60% of our clothing today is made out of synthetic fabrics like nylon, polyester, fleece, and spandex. And these synthetic fibers are made from fossil fuels, which means that they're essentially plastic. So every time we wash our synthetic clothing, it sheds microplastic fibers into the water, which ends up in our oceans. This contributes to the environmental footprint of the clothing since these plastic fibers don't biodegrade in the environment. Overall, the fashion industry has a massive impact on our environment, so we want to work to reduce the amount of clothing we buy, consume, and throw away. Next slide, please. During the holiday season, retail shopping and spending increases drastically. In 2022, about 50% of Gen Z and millennials surveyed were planning on buying a new outfit for the holidays, and this year, consumers are predicted to spend around $890 per person on average across gifts, food, decorations, and other seasonal items. This shows that beyond buying gifts, our overall consumption increases during the holiday season. Next slide, please. Black Friday and Cyber Monday fuel overconsumption, but these trends continue through the new year. Fast fashion brands will advertise extremely high sales. While these can be tempting, the clothes are very likely low quality and designed to last only a few years. What's more, these high urgency sales result in increased returns. Returning clothing creates additional emissions in shipping the item back to the retailer. And what's less known is that, especially through online returns, many clothing items that are returned, even if never worn, are never resold and are sent to the landfill instead. So, before buying into these mega sales, it's important to ask yourself, one, is this something I really need? Two, is this item good quality and will it last me a long time? It's better to buy one good quality item that is durable rather than 10 items that will only last a few wears before ending up in the trash. And three, is it super trendy but will go out of style next season, or will it be a timeless piece that I can wear for a long time? Next slide, please. So, here are a few things to consider when we are shopping during the holidays. Next slide. These are a few tips for when you're shopping for yourself. The first tip is to shop from your own closet. The most sustainable thing you can wear is what you already own. So, this is by far the best practice for reducing clothing waste. The second tip is to rent a holiday outfit. There are a lot of great clothing rental sites online where you can try out an exciting new holiday outfit for a fraction of the price, and you can avoid buying an outfit you'll only wear one time per year. This is also a fun way to try a piece you might not necessarily want to purchase. The third tip is to borrow from a friend or host a clothing swap. As Grace mentioned, we do have National Clothing Swap Day coming up this weekend. Clothing swaps are an awesome strategy. Hosting or attending them can be fun for your friends and community, where everyone brings a few gently loved items that they're willing to trade. This way, you can get something new to you while also cleaning out your own wardrobe and ensuring that your pre-loved clothing goes to someone who will wear and appreciate them. The fourth tip is to buy from a thrift or vintage store. With the rise in popularity for thrifting, there are now a lot of online sites too where you can buy secondhand clothing. And then finally, if you can't avoid buying new, the fifth tip is to buy from a more sustainable business. The website Good On You is a great resource where you can look up different brands to see their sustainability rating. And we will send this link out after the webinar. Some key things to remember are to try to avoid synthetic fabrics and sequins, which are both plastic. And you could also look for something that is made with high quality materials and will be timeless. Next slide, please. Since we are talking about holiday clothing, we can't forget one of the most popular types of holiday clothing, the holiday sweaters. In the UK, 1 in 3 adults under 35 buy a new holiday sweater every year, but 2 in 5 of these sweaters are only worn once over the holiday season. So, to avoid contributing to this waste, instead of buying a new holiday sweater, you can wear one you already own. So this sweater that I'm wearing is my holiday sweater, which instead of buying new, I bought secondhand a few years ago, and I love re-wearing it. You can also thrift a sweater, which helps keep it out of the waste stream for a bit longer. If you're buying one, you should stay away from the external decorations, like those shown on the photos on the left, because they're often made from plastic and make the sweater very difficult to wash, which incentivizes you to discard it more quickly. And the final tip is to host a craft night where you and your friends can upcycle your old sweaters. And you can even pick up your crafts from a creative reuse center, which is basically a secondhand store for crafts that would otherwise be in a landfill. Next slide, please. Finally, if you're shopping for a gift for a friend or loved one, here are some alternative gift ideas. You can make something for your loved one, such as knitting a blanket or crocheting a hat. Grace mentioned making your own gifts earlier is a great idea. This can save money and be a fun project to work on through the holidays. There are a ton of free online resources that teach you how to make things, even if you're a beginner. Next, you can get them a gift card. This helps avoid those wasteful returns that often happen when gifting someone an item of clothing since you don't know if it will fit them. You can also pick out an item you'd like to gift the person and then get a gift card for them to purchase it themselves in their correct size. Finally, it's important to try and avoid fast fashion. You can thrift or shop secondhand to find a more unique gift, as Grace mentioned, and you can also support a small business or more sustainable brand. This will result in a more quality gift as well that will last beyond a few wears. Overall, a lot of our holiday waste comes from clothing, whether you're buying for yourself or gifting an item to someone else. Those were a few tips I hope you can utilize this holiday season to embrace sustainable fashion. And I've also put together some action items and additional resources that Grace will send in the chat at the end of this webinar to take action against fashion waste in your day to day. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Emerson. Now we have Theo Rosen, who's the Climate Campaign's Associate with Environment America, telling us a little bit about zero waste gift wrapping.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. So I am here to talk about one of the most visible types of waste that you might see around the holidays, which is gift wrap. I know, at least in my house growing up, Christmas morning, it looked like a tornado had gone through our living room. There was wrapping paper just all over the place. And my dad would always work very carefully to collect it all, and do what he thought was the best thing to do, which was recycle it. However, the unfortunate reality is that a lot of wrapping paper is not actually recyclable. Shiny coatings and glitter can make it non-recyclable. And what that means is that over half of the wrapping paper that's produced each year actually ends up in the landfill. According to San Diego State University, an estimated 2.6 billion pounds of wrapping paper gets thrown away each year in the United States alone. For all the reasons that the previous panelists have talked about, that waste is a real problem. And it's sort of particularly absurd when it comes to gift wrap, which is just not even part of the gift that you're giving someone. So today I'm going to give some quick tips on kind of if you are going to buy some wrapping paper, how to make sure the stuff that you're buying is the recyclable stuff. But potentially even more importantly, gift wrapping is one of the easiest types of waste to just cut out of your life entirely. So I'll also give some ideas for more lower waste and more reusable forms of gift wrapping that take the plastic waste entirely out of the equation. And I'll end with a quick demo of what some cute and festive zero waste gift wrapping can look like. Next slide, please. All right, so if you are looking to buy some wrapping paper, you just want to make sure that you are buying the recyclable stuff. So some tips for that are to avoid glitter and foil. Those are the types of things that will just make the paper not recyclable. Another thing that will make it not recyclable is if it's coated in kind of a shiny plastic coating, which a lot of them are. You can do a scrunch test or a rip test. So if you can rip the paper easily and if you can scrunch it and it stays scrunched and doesn't kind of bounce back, that is probably just paper and it's recyclable. But if it's hard to rip or it bounces back, it's not easy to scrunch, that is probably coated in plastic and will be landfilled. Another thing to note is that made from recycled materials doesn't mean that something is recyclable. And so that messes with people sometimes. Always good to still check. Um, and another thing to look out for when you're buying wrapping supplies is ribbons and bows. So most ribbons and bows are not recyclable. Traditional kind of plasticky ribbons and bows are often made of a non-recyclable plastic paper composite. But there are lots of alternatives. So things like string or twine can make really cute recyclable ribbons. I have some very festive red kitchen twine right here. You can make nice bows out of, and this is totally recyclable. Um, Fabric ribbons, so something more like a traditional fabric ribbon like this. These are often made out of polyester and actually will be landfilled as well, but they're much easier to reuse than the more plasticky ribbons, and people actually tend to reuse them. So if you make the effort to reuse them year after year, these can be a great alternative as well. Next slide. All right. But better than going out and buying some new wrapping paper, there are also lots of lower waste ways to wrap your gifts as well. And you can kind of have fun getting creative with some of these. I know I did have some fun prepping for this. So the first tip is to just use materials that you already have. So if you already own wrapping paper, just use it. No need to go out and buy a new one every year. Even if it's birthday wrapping paper and you're wrapping for Christmas, it doesn't really matter. Always best to use what you already have. Old gift bags are another great thing too. Gift bags are often better than traditional wrapping paper because people actually tend to hold on to them and reuse them. So those can be a good option. Um, you can also DIY lower waste bows and ribbons out of things like newspaper. So I have a bow right here that I made out of a Costco ad that was delivered to my house. There's lots of tutorials for how to do these online, but you can create your own lower waist bows using materials that are just being delivered to your house as opposed to buying new ones. That's always a good option. You can also use newspaper to just wrap gifts. You can use it as wrapping paper. I don't have an example of that right here, but that works really well. You can also use paper bags, like paper grocery store bags. You can use it as wrapping paper. So I have an example of that on my other screen right there. This was a Whole Foods bag that I wrapped and made a big bow out of that red twine that I showed you earlier. And that totally works as well. You can also use bags like that as gift bags. So I'm going to show on my other camera here too. This is just a bag that I got takeout in a little while ago that I thought was nice and I held on to. And you zhuzh it up with a little ribbon, and some of these decorations and it makes a totally nice gift bag. That sort of brings me into my next point, which is to decorate with natural materials. So on that gift bag, if you saw, I can show them more up close. I used these dehydrated orange slices that I made. These are super easy to make. You just slice up an orange and you bake them kind of low and slow in your oven for several hours. They're super easy. They make your house smell delicious, and you can use them to decorate the things that you wrap. They're totally biodegradable, no waste. I don't have them with me right now, but I often will use things like pine needles, or I'll pull a little branch from a Christmas tree if I'm home, and use that, tuck that into the things that I'm wrapping as well. Also all natural, biodegradable. And then the last tip is to just opt for reusable. So opt for wrapping paper that can be reused year after year. Um, so there's a couple different ways to do that. One kind of fun one is to use part of the gift to wrap the rest of the gift. So if you're listening to Emerson's presentation and you're deciding to get someone some thrifted or sustainable fashion, you can often use that as part of the gift. So I have here, this is a thrifted sweater that I bought a little while back that I used here to wrap a little teddy bear up with a little bit of a bow. A scarf works great for this too. If you're getting someone a scarf, tote bag also works great. To just get someone a tote bag in addition to what you're getting them and using it to wrap that up. That can work really well. And then the last tip I have is just to use pieces of fabric. So there are lots of ways to do this. I'm going to do a little demo of it in a sec. But this can be really fun because you can use lots of different fabrics. You can kind of trade and swap with your friends and try out lots of different types of fabric wrapping. So I am going to demo how to wrap a gift in some fabric. So I have my demo camera here, and if we can cut the slides. Oh, perfect. Perfect. All right, so I have my little demo camera right over here. So I'm wrapping up this book. And one tip for this is that if you're wrapping in fabric, it's always easier to use a stretchy fabric. So that's what I have here. And then what you can do is stick it right in the middle, and you're basically going to wrap it just how you would wrap a normal gift. So you start by kind of folding in the sides, tightening that up, tuck in the sides just so you would tuck in wrapping paper on the other side. Grab the edges and tighten a knot. And what you can do with that then is tuck in all the kind of uglier edges. Get it all in. And then as a final touch, use some of those natural materials that we talked about earlier, your dehydrated oranges, and tuck them in to decorate. And you end up with a really cute, totally reusable wrapped gift. This one is particularly great because it's fully zero waste. This wrap will be totally reusable. These oranges are biodegradable. There's no tape, no paper involved, which is great. And like I was saying, you can use lots of different fun fabrics. I have another example of one right here. Trade and swap with your friends and have a lot of fun with that. All right. That is all I have for you tonight. I hope that gave you all some fun ideas for how to get creative with your wrapping and keep it lower waste this holiday season.
Awesome. Thank you, Theo. Sorry, it took me a second to switch out the slides again. Next, we have Brenna Stevens, who is a zero waste campaign associate with Osberg in Oregon, talking about food waste and how to reduce it during the holidays.
Yes, hello everyone. Excited to be here. Definitely going to use some of those fun wrapping tips this Christmas. Yeah, like Grace said, my name is Brenna Stevens. I'm the Zero Waste Associate with Osberg, primarily working to tackle food waste across Oregon. But the problem with food waste is much bigger than just Oregon. It's actually worldwide, and actually more than a third of the US food supply is wasted, and most of that ends up in the trash. So next slide. That means that over 30 million tons of food waste ends up in our landfills every single year. And given the hard work of the farmers who grow our food, the truck drivers who transport it, the cooks who prepare it, and all of the time, effort, and resources it takes for something to end up on our plates or a store shelf, the very last place we want it ending up is the trash. Beyond that, when food decomposes in landfills, it produces methane, a greenhouse gas that's 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Food waste is the single largest category of trash in our landfills, and so it plays a big part in contributing to climate change as well. And that changes over the holidays. Actually, household waste increases by about 25%, and as you can imagine, a lot of that is food. At the same time, around 18 million households are food insecure in the US. We just shouldn't be wasting all of this food, especially during the holidays. Food should be used for what it's intended for, being eaten, and where that isn't possible, it can be composted to create a sustainable loop. Next slide, please. The good news is that there are plenty of ways to significantly cut down on wasted food. And it's really in the spirit of the holidays to do so. We can help take care of our planet by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Families can save money by being strategic about holiday meals. You can support your community by donating extra food, and we can conserve the valuable energy, resources, and labor that goes into producing our food by keeping it out of the trash. So I've got a couple of tips for fighting food waste this holiday season so you all can help us take a bite out of the food waste problem, pun intended. So our first tip on the next slide is to plan ahead and serve strategically. Reducing holiday food waste can be as simple as making a good plan. If you're hosting, make sure to get an accurate head count, be aware of dietary restrictions, and plan accordingly. The Food Network suggests about a pound of food total per person. And then also the website savethefood.com also has a really handy tool to help you plan your menu in a way that will avoid food waste. Lastly, using smaller plates and letting guests serve themselves can help avoid plate scraps and also remind folks that even though everything looks really tasty, their eyes are not, in fact, bigger than their stomachs. On the next slide, our next tip is to know how to interpret food date labels. We're all familiar with the use by, best by, sell by dates that come on a lot of our food products. But what you might be less familiar with are that the fact that those labels are not federally regulated other than infant formula. So that means those date labels can mean a pretty wide variety of things. And because of that are more so an indicator of quality than they are of safety. And we know that at least 10% of household food waste is actually due to consumer confusion over these date labels. So again, with the exception of infant formula, food that is past its date label is usually still perfectly fine to eat, unless it's really evident that it's spoiled. So last year's can of cranberry sauce or green beans could still be easily incorporated into this year's meal or donated if you aren't planning to use it. And then next, you want to plan for leftovers. If you are hosting, make sure to establish a plan beforehand for how to deal with leftovers. Even if you planned the perfect menu, you might end up with a couple of things left over. So set the expectation ahead of time that guests should plan to take home leftovers, ask them to bring their own containers, maybe have a couple extras on hand for those who forget. And then after that, you want to store your leftovers properly. So the freezer is really your friend. It's basically a pause button for leftovers. A couple of things to keep in mind when freezing foods. You want to store foods with a higher risk of foodborne illness, like meats, near the back of the freezer. Don't put hot food in the freezer. It can cause other items to thaw, so you want to let it come to room temperature first. And then safely thaw foods in the fridge or a cold bowl of water. And finally, date label your own food so you know how long it's been in there for. This handy chart lets you know how long a typical holiday dish might last in the freezer for. And then finally, when in doubt, donate or compost. Your first goal with food waste, on the next slide, should always be to avoid it in the first place. But sometimes we end up with food that we really don't have a use for. And in that case, the very best thing to do with it is to donate it. Again, we want food to be eaten first and foremost. So if you have food that you know you aren't going to eat yourself, donate it. Existing laws protect people and organizations from liability when donating food to those in need. And just make sure to check in with your local food pantry to make sure that they actually have a use for what you're planning on donating. Otherwise, they might just end up having to throw it out themselves. So it's good to check in first. And then when that's not a possibility, composting is a great alternative. Sometimes food really can't be donated. It's gone bad or it's just scraps. Nobody wants to eat eggshells. So in this case, the answer is to compost it. If you don't have a compost, a lot of cities and farmers markets or community gardens have composting programs where you can drop off your scraps. You can also set up your own composting systems in your backyard or even in your kitchen. There's some great resources online about setting up a kitchen compost. So really, on the next slide, as a world, we could make a big impact on our communities and our environment by tackling food waste. Worldwide, we could feed 2 billion people with all of the food that we produce that we don't end up using. That's twice the number of undernourished people in the world. So while finding more sustainable ways to deal with food waste is really great, it's just as important to keep in mind the sheer absurdity that we waste it in the first place and think about ways to prevent the food waste before it even happens. So again, it would really have ripple effects for our communities and environment. The average household could save up to $1,500 every year by reducing food waste. We could provide thousands of meals to people, not to mention we can enrich our soil with high quality compost, significantly cut down on greenhouse gases. Actually, removing food waste from landfills could potentially reduce methane generation potential from landfills by 33%. And besides all of the ways that you can reduce food waste in your own household this holiday season, you can also help us tackle food waste on a larger scale. Because so much of our food is wasted due to those confusing date labels, we're working to pass the Food and Date Labeling Act, a bill that would help stop that waste by creating a new system of easier to understand food date labels. So you can let your senators know that you support the Food Date Labeling Act today by signing the petition that will drop in the chat a little later, and we'll also share some more resources on tackling food waste this holiday season. And yeah, that's what I got. So thank you all for listening to my spiel and for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Brenna. So that's all of our tips and tricks and ideas that we have for reducing all kinds of holiday waste this year as we celebrate the season. But we'd also love to hear from you. I know that people have been sharing like ideas, questions, and comments in the chat. And then panelists, you should have access to the chat now to answer questions and to drop your links. But we'd love to hear from you about what you guys do during the season to reduce waste and across all of these different waste streams. And panelists, if there's like a question you want to answer, you can go ahead and like show your camera and unmute and answer it.
Alice had a good question in the chat about donating food past Best By dates, reuse by dates. Usually it's just up to the organization. So some have certain protocols around that are different than others. So it's a good idea to just check in with your local food bank first and ask them if they'll accept it, because a lot of them will still accept and distribute that food.
And panelists are dropping things in the chat. And there are so many good ideas you guys have shared. People have talked about trying to reduce window shopping for unnecessary purchasing, different kinds of lights to use during the holidays, wrapping with just like simple brown paper supermarket bags with twine is a good way to use items you already have in your house in most cases, in a decorative, functional way. There was a question earlier also about plastic coated gift bags. It really does depend. There's not like a super universal answer to that question. Some gift bags, especially those with like glitter or other like adhesive things on the outside of them, are not recyclable because the glitter or the coating of it is plastic. But there are also recyclable gift bags on the market, so you'll just depend on what you're buying. Yes, I can send a follow-up email. Someone asked if resources and links can be shared via email as well. And yes, I can send a follow-up email to everyone that was here with the links to petitions and resources and guides that were shared from the panelists.
Someone had a good question in the Q&A about um, how to get friends and family on board with reducing waste over the holidays. If you have family members that buy you things that you don't need. Um, That's obviously a big question, and it'll vary a lot by family and who you're talking about. But I think taking the initiative to start to do some of these things yourself can be the most meaningful way to just introduce that to people. I think a lot of these things, as sort of intuitive as they might sound when presented sort of in a webinar format, are just not things people ever think about. They don't think about wrapping and finding a different way other than wrapping paper to wrap things. They're not thinking about asking people to bring Tupperware to um, limit food waste. And so the more that you can just introduce those ideas by doing them yourself, I think it makes it easier and easier for people to conceptualize that there's kind of a different way to be doing some of these things, and that can be really valuable um, on its own.
Yeah, I do agree to like piggyback off of what Theo just said. Someone in the chat just mentioned making wish lists to reduce like giving and receiving unnecessary items. So if you're doing like a Secret Santa where you're only buying like one gift per person, which can be a good way to reduce the like just volume of gifts you're giving and receiving, but also making wish lists or at least like bullet points. It doesn't have to be exact items of what kind of gifts you're looking for, or that you would actually have use for. But then also ensures that you're not just giving people things that they'll end up throwing away or sending to landfill. Other good ideas I've seen include going in on like a bigger ticket item with a group of people, like maybe friends or siblings, rather than a million small things. That can be a good way to like reduce just like tiny waste. Um, People saying they reuse gift bags for decades, which I think is really cool and also an awesome tactic if you have the storage space to do that. Do any of the panelists want to answer Fiona's question?
Well, Fiona asked, have any attempts to be more sustainable ever interfered with family traditions? Not in my experience. I think it would depend on what your family traditions are. My family, a little while back, switched to doing a Secret Santa as opposed to little gifts for everyone, which obviously changed what the tradition was, but started its own new tradition in many ways that people have come to really enjoy trying to guess who everyone has and that side of it too. So it can, yeah, it can if some of the traditions that you've grown up with or that your family is accustomed to involve um, some amount of waste, then yeah, it could change traditions, but it can always create new ones as well.
Yeah, there are definitely ways to incorporate zero waste like habits and tips into your existing traditions, but we're also not saying that you have to like eliminate all of your family traditions to like be perfectly zero waste all of the time. There's definitely a balance to be found. Brenna, do you know have an answer to Marie's question?
If there are good recyclable silverware cups that can be. I know that there are some like plant-based, like almost wooden paper and plates and silverware. And so those might actually be compostable in some places, but I'm not actually sure what the best things to do are. I would just like, yeah, check the packaging and check your local recycling um, policies.
Yeah, recycling policies are kind of variable by place. So it will like ultimately depend on where you are, and what product you're buying.
I saw a question about whether there's a tutorial for those newspaper bows that I showed before. Um, I don't have a tutorial, but I know when I made that, I just Googled newspaper bow, how to make one, and there's a million of them on the internet. So not hard to find, and they're very easy to make. You just kind of cut up strips of paper and fold them together. Uh, Highly recommend. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, that's the end of our webinar. Thank you guys so much for coming. It was great to hear from all of you about your like strategies and tips and tricks for limiting holiday waste of all kinds during the season. Hope that you can use some of them in your own life this year to limit your own environmental impact, while still celebrating the holidays you choose to celebrate. So thanks for coming. We will share this on the Environment America and PIRG websites probably by the end of the week. And yeah, have a happy holidays, everybody.